Did your house get bombed? Are you living with your terrible aunt who doesn't really care about you or see you as a human being? Well, I have a solution for you. Go live in a cave. This commercial was sponsored by Sakuma Fruit Drops. When you need help, ask Seta to open this for you. Alright, illusions aside, let's talk about punctuations today. Grammar, it's one of the things that scares people oftentimes, but at the same time, it is something that is like a missed opportunity when we talk about rhetorical analysis. And you might be thinking like, wait, you can analyze grammar for rhetorical analysis? Yeah, of course you can. And the thing is, remember we talked about stealing, right? Stealing is super important when it comes to grammar because these authors aren't just like, writing in a certain way to present their ideas. They're also, putting their pauses, their little step-by-steps for us to follow along here. And that is all done through by punctuations. So we're going to talk about grammar and just kind of see some of the techniques that you can observe and also incorporate into your own writing altogether here. So let's talk about the semicolon, right? It's no accident that a semicolon is a period atop a comma. Like commas, semicolons indicate an audible pause slightly longer than a commas, but short of a period's full stop. And you're thinking like, wow, that's really like specific, right? Like, who came up with this stuff and whatnot. But otherwise, in a shortened way of considering what a semicolon is, it basically is putting two full sentences together that are related, but you don't want to do like a full pause in between them because you want to connect them together side by side and just kind of make an elongated sentence altogether, right? And that's what we call between two independent clauses. Independent means it can stand by itself. It's strong. It don't need nobody in its life. It can just kind of like act on its own, right? And so in this case, the semicolon is just done so in that way. And let's get some examples. Let's just look at some examples real quick as to how semicolons are used here and the rules that go along with it. Rule number 1, A. A semicolon can replace a period if the writer wishes to narrow the gap between two closely linked sentences like I mentioned. So if you look at these examples down here, number 1, call me tomorrow. You can give me an answer then. So the two are kind of related, right? But I didn't need to do a period in between. I can just do a semicolon and do it as such here. So these are two independent clauses because they can stand by themselves. Call me tomorrow, it's an imperative sentence, so it's just like a demand, like a request of some sort, right? And the other one, you can give me an answer then. It has, the fixings of a full sentence. You, the subject, can give me an answer then, sort of like verbs. Half of it there, right? So it can stand by itself. It doesn't need extra context there. But otherwise, they are an indicator of an action in time, and then later they also have the, I guess like the parameters of it, the sort of like guidelines of it there. Anyways, they relate with each other, so you can put them together with that semicolon there, if they are both independent clauses. In the second example, we have paid our dues. We expect all the privileges listed in the contract. So in this case, again, it's related in the information or the situation together, right there. It's about paying dues. It's about a contract that has to relate with those dues and has privileges tied to it there. So you could do two sentences and, make it separate, but it's choppy. You know what I mean? It's choppy because, here, check this out. What if I did this, right? What if I just, boom, put a period in between? So I would be like, we have paid our dues. Stop. We expect all the privileges listed in the contract. And, I mean, it works. It's fine, but it does make a stop then when really we can just go all in one go without having that pause in the first place. So sometimes we do semicolons just for the sake of combining like ideas into make these super long sentences. It creates like this ongoing kind of like, rhythm when we're doing so, right? But we have to be careful because we have to avoid a semicolon when a dependent clause comes before an independent clause here. Dependent, it needs somebody. It needs somebody to make context and to make sense of. So if you look at this sentence here, although they tried, semicolon, they failed. You can't do that because the first part is what we call the dependent clause here, because it says, although they tried. Let's say we stop there, right? Although they tried, so what? All it's really doing is doing like a setup. All it's really doing is like ramping up an idea, but then it doesn't get there, right? So in this case, we call it dependent clause because as I'm looking at that, I'm thinking like, okay, so what, right? And then later, the they failed is a full sentence, surprisingly, because, what about them? Failed. Okay, the end, right? So it's independent clause there. What you have to do then is put a comma in between because it is a dependent and independent clause there. So I'll have a video on commas as well, but just as a sort of rule of thumb here, you got to consider if your sentence can stand by itself, or is it like one of those sentences that, or clauses rather, that depend on another part to make sense, and therefore decide if you use semicolon or not there. We also use semicolons before such words in terms as namely, however, therefore, that is, for example. when they introduce a complete sentence, it is also preferable to use a comma after these words and terms here. So again, the rules that are presented here, they sound kind of like, I don't know, jargony and wonky, but let me just give you examples to make sense of it here. So let's say I have this sentence over here, right? Bring any 2 items, semicolon. However, sleeping bags and tents are in short supply. So what happens here is these are 2 complete sentences, but they are related, but the relation between them may not be super clear unless there is like a sort of like modifier to it, right? Which is the word however or therefore or whatever. So let's say I just had this part here. Let's just say I had, give me a sec. Let's say my sentence was simply, bring any 2 items, sleeping bags and tents are in short supply. It's like, okay, I mean, I get what you're saying and I get what's happening here, but why these 2 sentences together, right? The relationship between them is a little bit broad or a little bit unclear. So let's reverse this real quick here and put the however back. So if I put bring any 2 items, however, sleeping bags and tents are in short supply, my indication is, well, you should probably bring sleeping bags and tents because we're in short supply there. So in this case, it gives that relationship that might not be clear explicitly for readers, right? So when you do semicolons between 2 full sentences or 2 independent clauses, just make sure that there is relation between the 2 here. Or if not, then make it clear. Number 3, rule. Use a semicolon to separate units of a series when 1 or more of the units contain commas. So this is like a very specific situation. Basically, let's say you have some big old lists of items, right? Well, in our regular lists, we just use commas because if I just went like, I'm going to the store to buy eggs, ham, and cheese. So I'll just be like eggs, comma, ham, comma, and cheese, right? But if you have items that have commas in between them, then you need to separate it with semicolon here. Let's take like an example real quick. The conference has people who have come from Moscow, Idaho, Springfield, California, Alamo, Tennessee, and other places as well. So in this case, the problem is these are not all individual places, they are city and state. So my problem now is, well, I don't want to do commas because it sounds like there's 6 places by themselves, right? When really there are 3 places because it's kind of like boom, 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 right? So let's break it up with semicolons here. And what happens now is Moscow, Idaho. So in this case, the 2 are related. Next one, semicolon, Springfield, California. Next one, Alamo, Tennessee. And what I'm doing is I'm grouping it with the appropriate state and city, right? And then later, that's what the semicolon's purpose is to separate these like extra little bits that have commas in between there. Crook number 4. We also use a semicolon between independent clauses joined by a connector such as and, but, or, nor, etc. when 1 or more commas appear in the first clause. Again, rules are kind of janky, but let me explain what I mean here. Example. Sentence says, when I finish here, and I will soon, I'll be glad to help you. And that is a promise I will keep. Well, let's say this, right? Let's say I had just a comma there. Now you got like 3 commas in here, and it's becoming of a run-on here because all that's happening is when I finish here, and I will soon. So the little middle part there, and I will soon, is like a little disclaimer, right? And I will soon. I'll be glad to help you. And that is a promise I will keep. It's like too many ideas at once, right? And even though the last part is related, it's kind of like a side comment that stands on its own as well. So what I would just do is just put a semicolon instead, and then later connect it with a connector with like and, but, or, nor, just show relationship, and later make that sentence as such there. So if you find yourself with like a bunch of commas because you have like what we call these are like non-restrictive clauses. If you have like these little modifiers in between and you need to separate 2 sentences, semicolon, boom, you're good. Parentheses. A lot of people are really scared of using parentheses because it sounds really informal or looks rather informal. But the problem with that thinking is, well, authors do it too, reports do it too, anywhere you really see it does it too here. I know it's been taught as like an informal style of writing, but I mean, used moderately and purposefully, it's fine. It enhances your writing if done correctly, right? So a lot of us kind of like just use parentheses for things like sourcing, you know what I mean, like in text citations and all that. But no, like a parentheses does a lot of good for our writing here. So it can allow us to put in extra information, interrupt the syntactic flow of words, allow readers to pay attention to the explanation. It has a couple of functions that we do know about them. It's just that we should pay attention to that and to also incorporate into our writing here, right? So let's look at some examples of how the parentheses really helps us altogether. Let's say I want to sneak in and offer more information. So my sentence says, I wasn't that hungry that day. Parentheses, never really felt hungry ever. That first part, it just makes a statement. I wasn't hungry that day. But that little extra little bit with the parentheses lets me know that, oh, maybe this person doesn't eat that much in general, so this is like any other day, right? But maybe that's a problem too to consider. So those little parentheses there, it gives us like, that extra information that keeps us thinking or adds context or what have you. We can also use it to make a side comment. So this is a great way to put voice in your writing too, because this person says, Mother's fury. What a great fury she had. Was something we all try to avoid, but often in failure. So it's not even just mother's fury. This person's kind of offering a little subjective looking at this, where it's like, by the way, just so you know, it's a great fury, right? It's like, if you didn't know how much fury it was quite a great fury altogether. And that's what we do with parentheses as well. We can make a little side comment for that sort of effectiveness or impact on our readers there. Colons. Nice and easy. Colons, the two dots, right? They are just used after complete sentences to preface the incoming information. I had a professor in college basically describe them as fanfares. This is why I have a picture of a fanfare guy here. Because what colons do is used to introduce something that comes after like the full sentence, right? So it's kind of like, here's the setup for the full sentence, here's the actual information that comes afterwards there. So we oftentimes use it for like upcoming information or for a list of items that will come up as well. So some examples of this. Number one, you might be wondering how much you're receiving from the lottery after tax. And then you're thinking like, yeah, I am wondering, what is it? So colons, a whopping $100,000. So in this case, it sets up that number that comes afterwards, and the entire first part of it is just to, build up to that kind of information afterwards, right? Or you can also do a list with colon here where it says, these are the rules of the house. Okay, so I'm expecting the rules now. No littering, no cursing, no waking up in the middle of the night to wake me up, and no breathing loudly. First of all, you might not want to answer this ad. You should try the cave that I advertised in the beginning. That's a place that you can do whatever you want. Again, endorsed by Fruit Drops. So, anywho, it shows the list of things, you know what I mean? And it shows that this colon here is letting me know that the list is coming up for punctuation's sake here. M dash. Oh man, M dash is the cheat code of writing here. Now, you do too many of these and people start questioning your grammar, but a nice M dash here and there really does the trick. And it's so versatile, you can use it for almost anything. You can use it to replace parentheses, serve as a colon. It can even be a comma here and there. So it kind of does everything mostly. Let me show you how you can use it for the most part here. So if you look at this first part, please call my lawyer, Richard Smith, on Tuesday. So I put M dashes between Richard Smith, and by doing so, it's kind of like a parentheses, or it's kind of like commas, right? I'm isolating the information of who the lawyer's name, what the lawyer's name is there, Richard Smith. The rules are simple: kill or be killed. So it's kind of like a colon as well, right? The rules are simple. Well, what are the rules? Kill or be killed. And the M dash also does that. I prefer to discuss politics, M dash. My sister prefers to discuss art. So it shows like a separation, kind of like the semicolons, right? Two full sentences here, where in the first one, the guy is like, I prefer to discuss politics. Okay, well, what about your sister? Well, in the second sentence, then, my sister prefers to discuss art. And in doing so, the M dash fills all the roles. I love doing M dashes. You'll see me do them oftentimes, and I don't know, just convenient. It's just like a stylistic thing I do. But some people do have grudges against them because they're kind of like, it's too much of a cheat code. You know what I mean? Maybe we shouldn't use too many M dashes here. So why do we go over this here? Well, in looking at an author's syntax, right, we're looking at their sentence variety. We're looking at how they kind of like, control the flow and the kind of information given to us at once. Maybe they want to do like a long trailing sentence with multiple ideas, maybe some short ones for commentary or transition. Whatever it might be, it does require a punctuation here and there, right? Or a thinking of how to punctuate. So when you're doing your own essays or looking at author speeches and all that, pay attention to the syntax, because those little points there are not just random, they are also thought out, and they do a really big deal for the essay.